I dodged when my niece and nephew tried to push me in the pool, so they fell in. Am I the A*** hole?
Am I the a-hole for jumping out of the way when my niece and nephew tried to push me into a pool, resulting in them falling in? My folks decided to host a barbecue because I guess that's what older people do. I declined because I really don't like my two sisters, their husbands, or their kids. Wife and I are child-free. Mom then pressured the wife. Long story short, we went. By the time we arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already solidly buzzed. Drunk, really. My mom was spending 100% of her time trying to keep the nieces and nephews, ages 7 to 11, more or less under control. My dad had strategically retreated to the whirlpool part of the pool with small cooler full of beers. Wife and I made small talk with miscellaneous people, ate food, and had a frozen margarita. Sisters' Bills took turns criticizing us for being late, not being in our swimsuits and screwing up the vibe. Whatever. Typical suburban summer get-together. About 45 minutes in, two of the kids ran at one of the neighbor guests who was standing next to the pool and pushed her in. She was at the pool steps, stumbled in, but didn't fall, so only got half wet. She was clearly very unhappy about it, but she didn't make a scene, just went over to where the parents were, grabbed their towels, dried herself off, and left. Sisters and BILs thought it was all great fun. A bit later, I was standing a few feet away from the pool, chatting away with someone. I saw 3 of the kids running full tilt at me from the corner of my eye. Obviously, I was next. Not that it's terribly difficult to outwit young kids, but I just jumped out of their way at the last second. All 3 of them ran straight into the pool at full speed. Most of the other guests, including my wife and me, started laughing, but their moms, who as I mentioned were pretty shit-faced, absolutely freaked out. Apparently 2 of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were in swimsuits. Since I wasn't in swim gear, I stepped back from the pool and let other people fish the kids out. The kids were bawling their heads off like they'd lost a limb. At that point, all hell broke loose. The 4 drunk parents were yelling at everyone in general, and me in particular, for nearly letting their kids drown, and also because 2 of the kids had been videoing the trick using their parents' iPhones, which were now at the bottom of the pool. One of my BILs got into the pool to try to retrieve the phones, but his BMI and BAC made that impossible. No one else volunteered to help. Unsurprising, given that my sisters were still bitching at everyone. I told my sisters it was their job to watch their kids, and that if anything had happened to them, it would have been their responsibility, not mine. There were some pretty strong words on both sides. Wife and I left after the other BIL fell over and face planted while yelling at us. Now they're saying I should have let the little shits knock me into the pool and have their fun and ruin my phone. Update. First off, my folks tell me that my nieces and nephews are all good swimmers and that they use the pool all the time. The 7-year-old is still a beginner, but he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim, so I'd look bad. To be fair, none of the kids are allowed in the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was the 2 10-year-olds and the 9-year-old who tried to push me into the pool. After we left, the party ended on a pretty sour note. My drunk brother-in-law, who face planted while yelling at me, had to go to an urgent care place and get his face stitched up. He was too toasted to drive, so Dad took him. Dad was very not happy about this. Late that evening, my sisters started a group text and said some really nasty crap. Their husbands threw in a few comments as well. Wife and I blocked the 4 of them. My mom called me. She was pretty upset about what they said. She and Dad were in the chat, and I don't blame her. Because of the texts, my folks insisted my sisters' BILs come over the next day, Sunday, without their kids to get some things straight and lay down some ground rules, Mom's wording. The result was a contrite, if unenthusiastic, apology from the siblings via my mom's phone. I'm glad my wife was with me when they called. Her hard stares kept me from saying what I wanted to. I just told them thanks and that we felt no need to discuss it further. Since I thought things were settled, I unblocked them. That evening, I got a text from one of the BILs telling me the phones cost XXXX and asking when I'd be paying for them. WTF? I replied, never. Took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my folks with a note that we were done with this nonsense. We're going no contact with sisters, spouses, and not to invite us to any more holidays or get-togethers if they'll be present. Then I blocked the sisters and their spouses again. At that point, the shit really hit the fan. Dad called them and ripped them a new one. Among other things, he told them the grandkids were not welcome at his place indefinitely. Since my mom regularly provides free babysitting, That got them pretty rattled. He also banned them from using the vacation house and told them my wife and I actually own it, not he and Mom. This completely freaked them out. Both of my sisters and families use the place a lot, including having their friends up for weekend getaways. This was very much out of character for my folks. They'd clearly had it. And for reference, I never wanted my sisters to know we own the place. We bought it for my folks. They'd always wanted a place in the mountains. Keeping the ownership quiet was just a way to avoid drama with my siblings. A couple of days later, my sisters and their husbands came to our place unannounced to apologize in person. We were out to dinner, and they left a note. One sister also called me at work too. I sent her to voicemail. We've decided being no contact is the best thing for the indefinite future, and haven't interacted with them for the last 3+ weeks. Personally, I'm done. They can go pound sand. Update. Well, it's been an interesting last few days. I thought the shit had hit the fan before, but it was more of a fart compared to what's happened this week. For this to make sense, I need to provide some financial context. My folks haven't ever been any good at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I know pretty much everything about them money-wise. Their house is paid for, and they have minimal debt, but they didn't save much for retirement. Both of them get Social Security. Dad gets a solid pension, and they have a bit of savings, but there's no treasure chest in the basement. I bought their current car for them after they retired a retirement present, so they could have something nice to drive. It was the first car in probably 20 years they didn't lease. My sisters are convinced the folks are dripping with money, and that our parents will be leaving the two of them everything since I don't need more money. So they've never cared about saving either. Turns out my oldest sister and her husband, they have 3 kids, have been living beyond their means for some time and are in financial straits. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car leases to the point that one is about to get repossessed. He'd bragged in the past about making X per year, but it turns out to be about half that. She confessed all this to Mom on Tuesday because they need a loan, and because, and this was a WTF moment for Mom and Dad, that for the last 3 years, instead of staying at the vacation house regularly, she's actually been renting it out once a month or so and pocketing the cash. We're talking $2,000 plus for a weekend, and at least $4,000 for a week. With her being cut off from using the place, she's had to cancel one group already. She's now worried they'll lose everything. My folks aren't in any position to give them a loan. My other sister was aware of her renting out the place, but of course hasn't ever said anything. I suspect she's done the same thing as well, because I went up there once to drop off an ATV I'd had worked on, and there was a family there who claimed to be staying there with my sister, her family, and that they'd gone to town for something. At the time I let it go. I figured she'd loaned out the house to some friends, but I've always wondered. I found all this out through my folks who are pretty stressed out about it, Mom more than Dad. He's mainly just pissed off about it all. I know Dad feels betrayed, and I imagine he's embarrassed that he's in no position to help his daughter out. He did reiterate that as long as it's up to him, the girls won't be using the vacation home anytime soon. My folks let me know what's going on because they figured my sisters would put a full court press on me next. And they were right. On Thursday, my sisters came to our place again, without husbands this time, and waited outside the door until I got home. I had to choose between fighting with them in public, them making a scene if I went in without them, or letting them in. So I let them in. I got a bullshit story from the older sister with the younger one backing her up regarding why I needed to let them use the mountain place again immediately. They also said I've been a shitty brother and that I needed to step up and plan on paying for their kids' college tuitions, since that's what family does. I let them pitch their story, then called them out, based on what my folks had told me. Things went to shit from there. There was denial, crying, cursing, yelling, you name it. I swear my ears are still ringing 2 days later. Won't lie, I said some really mean and shitty things to them, but nothing that wasn't true. They finally left after about an hour. After that, I took a shower and laid down. When I got up, my wife was home, and her first words were that she'd had to block more phone numbers because my sisters were blowing up our phones from new ones. Folks messaged me yesterday asking me to call. I'm sure my sisters have told them some bullshit version of what happened, but I'm not up to rehashing it yet. I'm usually a pretty energetic person, but this drama has me beaten down. I had just enough energy today to drive up to the vacation house and padlock the entrance gate shut. I'm the only one with a key. I'm guessing that will be enough to ensure my siblings leave the place alone. They'd probably die trying to walk 400 yards uphill to get to the house. Update. After my sisters came to my place, my mom and dad told me they were done with managing the vacation home. Sounded like the sisters had been pressuring them to let them use the place again. Basically, my folks handed the responsibility for place over to me and told me it was my problem from here on out. Up until then, they'd kept track of who would be using it when, and they'd taken care of routine maintenance, replacing worn-out items, etc. In any case, they decided they didn't want to be in the middle of all this crap. While I don't blame them, I'm disappointed because the damn place was supposed to be something for them to enjoy and hang out in, and they use it regularly. Plus, I've never cared that they let my sisters and their families use it, because really, I've always thought that was my parents' call, even though I technically own it. But now my folks are going to be in the position of not having access without me being involved, and that changes the whole dynamic of the place. I've taken several steps to secure the place. I already mentioned that I locked the gate. It has a heavy-duty chain and the best lock I could find. I also did a full reset on all the door keypads and created all new codes. Security cameras got installed yesterday, which is actually pretty cool because the installer convinced me to put a high-res one that looks out over the valley. The system cost me way more than I thought it would, but the peace of mind is worth it. The installer also put up signs on the property saying the place was monitored by video. I also installed a heavy-duty lockout for the water shutoff and drain valve. I hope to hell I don't lose the keys for it, because if I do, it's going to be a bear to try to remove. Haven't told anyone but my wife that the water is locked off, and again, only we have the keys. Last week, I got separate calls at my office from both of the husbands trying to convince me to let them use the house like they always have. The older one had gone up with some friends for a guy's hangout, but couldn't get in because of the gate lock. He was pretty pissed and embarrassed about being locked out. I'm sure he would have broken the lock if he could have. During his call, he kept bouncing between pushy and victimhood. At one point, he threatened to rip that gate out of the goddamn ground. He also admitted they'd been renting it out to a few friends, that they needed the money, I was ruining their business, and that I should refund their guests' money. Me? F that. I should have recorded the conversation with him, but I don't know how to do that from an office phone anyway. The other BIL just sounded like he was being made to call by my sister. He didn't really put up a fight when I told him not to plan on ever using the place again. In any case, I told them they can't use the place and not to ask again. At this point, I'm considering selling the vacation home. Wife and I won't use it enough to justify keeping it, and it's not like there's going to be any family get-togethers there anytime soon. I mentioned selling it to my folks. Their response was pretty much whatever. I'd more than double my money by selling it. The place consists of 3 lots with killer views and is at the end of a private road. But I'll probably wait for a while to sell. Doing so now would be an emotional decision. My sisters and I aren't currently speaking, and I have no plans to initiate contact. I don't know what the status between them and my folks is, and I don't want to. On the upside, we spent an evening with my folks last week. Went to a new restaurant that was nice. No one brought up any of this crap. Mom did update us on the nieces and nephews. She's spending time with them at their homes. Sorry this update isn't full of laughs or owns. That's just life sometimes. Last update, I hired a guy to look over the vacation home. He lives in the area, takes care of his folks, and manages a good number of properties. Some are vacation rentals, some are weekend places like ours. He has access to my camera feeds and does a physical check on the place every week or two. I think he may have the best job in the mountains. He gets paid to drive around with his dog, walk around the properties, and hangs out on people's decks whenever he feels like it. He also has a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road that takes still shots whenever a vehicle goes past it. $450 per month. Plus, he'll do basic maintenance and repairs on an hourly basis. He's friends with all of the sheriff's deputies too. Got a lot of peace of mind from doing this, and he sends photos from his walks to everyone once or twice a week. I have to brag a bit on my parents. I got all this from them tonight at dinner. They were getting pressure from my sisters to demand that I open up the vacation house to everyone for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving up there had become quite the tradition for the family, not for me or my wife. We've gone once in 7 years. My dad refused to bother me about it because he knew I'd say no. They came up with what I think is a great plan, announced that they were organizing the Thanksgiving gathering, and if everyone split the cost in advance, they'd rent an Airbnb in the mountains. Otherwise, they'd host Thanksgiving at their place, or one of the sisters could host it. This caused a fight between the sisters because the middle sister was all for doing the Airbnb, but the oldest one doesn't have any money. The deadline to commit to the Airbnb has passed. Looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' place. Regardless, we won't be there. My parents have asked that we not sell the place for now. They decided they'd still like to use it occasionally, but not until my sisters have come to terms with the new normal. And of course, they'd probably like it if everyone could get together there again down the road, but that's just not going to happen. I'd just as soon sell it and move on at this point, but I can live with keeping it if my folks do use it now and again. Plus, it will be worth even more down the road. Wife and I have stayed no contact with my sisters and their husbands. Both sisters have called from new numbers, FU Google Voice, and left messages insisting that I meet with them for our parents' sake to work out how everyone can use the family vacation home. They called my wife too. I'm glad I was already in the habit of not answering calls if I don't recognize the number. I honestly don't know if they're delusional or if they think they can bully me into giving them access again. Don't really care. My parents tell me that the oldest sister and her husband are getting out of the leases for their SUV and big-ass truck and are selling their jet skis and some other shit they've never needed. That's going to be really hard on her. She's quite the braggart and won't like being seen in something older, smaller, cheaper. My Bill's identity is very much wrapped up with his truck as well. He even has a small tattoo of the truck company's logo, which frankly is one of the many reasons why he and I never hung out. Several people have suggested I make the vacation home into an Airbnb. I don't plan to do so, at least anytime soon. I know it would make money, but it would cause an incredible amount of drama across the family and would stress out my parents. They don't need that. It would also be a hassle to remove personal things my folks have there. That stuff has nowhere to go, and there would be wear and tear on the place, and I'm sure it would take some amount of time on my part even though I'd use a manager to do it. Just not worth it to me.